It is the 11 Dubcast. I'm Johnny. He's George. And, you know, we've got a lot to talk about with the Ohio State win against their mighty foes from Marshall, from West Virginia. And, there's a lot to get into. There's a lot to talk about. There's a lot of national things we can get into. There's some other Ohio State non-rev sports, things like that. I want to start though, because we're gonna hit the Marshall game first, and then move on to other things. I want to start with a statement from Will Howard that I think is just like so indicative of where we are at in terms of like NIL and transfers and things like that. And one of the things that Will Howard said after the game, which Ohio State did win 49-14 by any metric, a very respectable win. But he said, it'll be nice that there won't be a whole lot that people will find to criticize or talk about or complain about. And I was like, sir, have you met Ohio State fans? Yeah. and look, it's I love the fact that we've got him in Columbus and things like that. But Will Howard, you have not met, I think, really the reaction that Ohio State fans and maybe the media, including ourselves, will have after a perceived, I wouldn't say mediocre, but maybe slightly lacking win against an overmatched opponent.
There's fans that would criticize that statement in and of itself.
Yeah, right. Exactly.
Like, oh my God, Will Howard is so complacent with.
That's right.
How many touchdowns? Only winning by 5 touchdowns. How dare he?
Right. Like what that's not a winner's mentality. Fake Buckeye. That's not a winner's mentality, Will Howard.
No, half of the Buckeye fan base is that Tom Brady meme where he's got like the angry eyes and he's saying we're only up by 40.
Yeah.
Which, that's coincidentally, that's what the spread on this game was, and Ohio State didn't cover. So,
well, there you go.
Everybody's very upset about that.
Yeah, you're pissing off everybody. The bettors are mad. Everybody's angry. This team's going to lose 5 games, and it's going to be awful. No, I enjoyed the game.
The very esteemed Brett McMurphy says, good teams win, great teams cover.
There you go.
So is Ohio State really a great team if they're 1-2 against the spread this season?
Well,
you can't beat Akron by 50 points. You can't beat Marshall by 40.
That actually does raise a good question. Like, at what point does the spread get so ridiculous that it's impossible to cover? You know what I mean? Like, if there's a situation where it's like, well, the spread's 60 now, so if you didn't cover it, you must suck. Like, I don't. First of all,
we saw the height. I'm sorry to cut you off. But we saw the height of it before the season even started.
Yeah.
How do you expect a team to cover by 50 points when they haven't played a down of football in the season yet? That's absurd.
Right. No, that's an excellent point. You're right. I mean, how do you even make that line in the first place? Yeah, it's ridiculous.
They weren't very far off, but only because of a garbage time defensive touchdown.
Right.
And they still didn't cover.
Right. But regardless, I think the point that we're making here is that the expectation game is just completely bonkers and out of pocket, and it's hard to look at a game that Ohio State wins by 35 points and really have too many negative things to say, like actual negative things to say. They're nits that you can pick at, and we'll talk about some of those. But I do want to start with some of the things that I thought was pretty positive. I mean, first of all, I will say this: I don't think I was surprised, at least, that they came out a little bit sluggish. I thought this was actually the game that they were going to have against Western Michigan. And in retrospect, I should have kind of tabbed it for this game because you're coming off a bye. You're playing 2 kind of underwhelming opponents ahead of this. And, you're not, I mean, not to disrespect Marshall, but like they're pumping up biscuits before the game. You know what I mean? Like this is not a situation where you're like, okay, this is like do or die time. So, defense came out a little flat. Marshall showed some things that they hadn't shown before, particularly just in terms of like how they're doing their passing game and things like that. Stone Earl, their quarterback, I thought played pretty well in general. They were doing a lot of 2-step drops and just zinging it out as fast as possible. He did pretty well until he got injured. And with all that said, Marshall did nothing in the second half, right? So they put together a couple of good drives, including one at the beginning of the game. Everybody freaked out, and then after that, they basically did nothing, and that's fine. I don't take a lot of umbrage with that. I don't know how you feel about it, but it's not something that freaks me out, especially
Well,
when you've got Tyleek out, right? You've got one of your best defensive linemen who isn't there in the game.
yeah, but that's the flip side of this too. Is that it concerned me that, I mean, we thought very, very highly of Ohio State's interior after the first two games,
Right.
and I think we all wanted to believe that it went like there was more depth there than it just being a credit to Tyleek Williams.
Mm-hmm.
And unfortunately, this game kind of revealed that there's a little bit more to, there's a ways to go after him,
Right.
for that. Because even after the first drive that they, conceded the score to Marshall, I mean, they still got pretty badly gashed up the middle for a decent amount of the rest of the game.
Mm-hmm.
The final stats I don't think really tell the whole story. I mean, it's kind of crazy looking at this that Marshall elected to run the ball 43 times.
Yeah, for
But
2.9 a carry
right,
overall.
but they had more success than that doing that in the first half. So
Mm-hmm.
it's not necessarily indicative. And they scored before the half too. They got a very big drive right before going into the locker room. With an impressive conversion. It was funny. I went to an alumni association event for this game, and they're having, because I'm in South Carolina, if you can believe this, the first two that I went to, there were no Akron fans there, and there were no Western Michigan fans there.
I can believe that. Yes,
I guess
George.
those fan bases don't travel, but
Sure.
there were two Marshall fans at this one, and one of them was the local weather woman that's
Okay.
on like the one of the news affiliates here in Charleston,
Right.
and she was standing up and cheering, of course, like directly in front of the screen that I'm trying to watch the game on. She's standing up and cheering every time Marshall, does anything as effective as fall forward for positive yards.
And they had 18 first downs, so I imagine that she was like in your grill quite a bit during the game.
I remember posting in Slack during the game. I was explaining this to you guys, and I said, I'm sitting next to a very enthusiastic Marshall fan, and I'm just very disappointed that her spirit hasn't been broken yet. So that was about the height of my disappointment with how this game played out relative to Ohio State, is that I don't want these teams that are observably worse than the Buckeyes to give their supporters any bit of enthusiasm or hopeful, wishful thinking that they might be able to pull this result out. And that is not what happened for the first 30 minutes of this game. Now, to your point, Marshall, according to, I believe it was Jordan Hancock that said this post game. And this is something that Chase on the 11 Warriors beat pointed out to us after the game when some were asking about it. Marshall did in fact come out and do some stuff that had not previously been on film that Ohio State hadn't necessarily been prepared for. Yep. And if you've played football before, I mean, there's plenty of teams that will do that, not only at the beginning of the season, but even, if a team is your last game of the season.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, they could come out in a defensive alignment that you don't even expect, and then your game plan goes not necessarily in the toilet at that point, but your quality of how good you are as a team then becomes, how quickly does your coaching staff put together a new plan or observe what's going on and then be able to adapt to that.
Right.
And I think Jim Knowles did a relatively good job of that. It just kind of it didn't. The one thing that I think that we take a lot of things for granted as Ohio State fans, but these guys make very, very good second half adjustments. Mm-hmm. And I think that they did that in this game too. But I also wonder how much more success Marshall could have built on from their first half if Stone Earl had stayed healthy in this game.
Right.
Because once they put Braylon Braxton in, that guy couldn't I mean, that guy would throw a rock at the ocean and miss. I mean, his accuracy was terrible.
It's pretty
and
bad.
and Chad Pennington's son wasn't really great in relief either. I think he only threw 2 passes, so it was kind of hard to gauge what he was going to do anyway. I don't even really know how long he was in there. But I remember thinking, and the broadcast, which had an interesting day, didn't really point this out to the TV audience that Earl had gotten hurt. It just kind of seemed like they elected to put Braylon Braxton in as a change of pace thing.
Mm-hmm.
And at
And
the
then just
time,
kept him in.
yeah, at the time, I just thought that was a really, really poor decision that they did that to try to keep themselves in the game. But if Earl
Right.
actually did get hurt, which apparently he did, and it stayed healthy, I wonder how much more success they could have built on that they had in the first half.
Right.
I'm encouraged by the fact that they adapted, but I think that this also kind of triggered some warning signs to, teams that are going to play Ohio State in the future, that if you come out prepared to do something that you haven't shown them before, there's going to be an adjustment period for them.
Mm-hmm.
And if they don't have Tyleek healthy, they're there to be had on the interior for the time being. So
Yeah,
this isn't the invulnerable Great Wall of Columbus that we seem to believe it was to start the season.
I think one of the things that was more disappointing to me was just kind of the linebacker play in general. And you saw some, like Cody Simon getting lost in the wash, multiple times. I think a guy like Arvell Reese, you're going to see a lot more often because he does seem to be more reliable and kind of those 50-50 situations where you have to really make a decision whether you're going to be in coverage or you're going to be like running up to stop the run. He just seems a lot more decisive. And I think you're going to see a lot more of that dude in the rotation as they go forward through the season. But I don't know. I mean, part of it, I do think that part of it was them just being super vanilla, not being super focused at the beginning of the game. And that's when we say this, it's also important to point out that's just the defense, because offensively, I mean, you can look at Will Howard and go, okay, this guy really needs to work on his long ball. He's got to figure out, what that looks like, especially with, Jeremiah Smith. But like, overall, I mean, the way the offensive line is run blocking in particular is just absolutely bonkers. It's not just that Henderson and Judkins are going out there and just, I mean, both of them. It's interesting because we talked about like, oh, they've got different running styles. They look really similar, honestly. Like there does not seem to be a huge drop off in terms of like speed or power or anything like that.
No,
No
I
matter
mean,
who's
you
in.
and I kept saying the whole offseason and going into the first couple of weeks that Henderson is the home run hitter of the two.
Yeah.
And it
Right.
turns out, no, both of them are actually home
Yeah.
run hitters.
Right, exactly. They're both killing it there. But the thing is, though, is that it's not just that, that talent that's showing out. It's also the fact the offensive line is allowing these guys to get to the second and third level without being touched. And on these runs, like the Judkins run that he had, I mean, I think he had to kind of squeeze past one or two guys, but it's not like he's breaking through 3 or 4 tackles to get these yards. Like Trayvon Henderson in his big run, I don't think was touched at all. When he took the ball, like that's the kind of thing that you really want to see continue to develop. And like, if the identity of this team is this is a running team that will occasionally break one long, they'll keep running those tunnel screens to the Jeremiah Smith or Emeka, and they'll do. I'm cool with that. I don't care if Will Howard isn't bombing things like a CJ Stroud might. I don't care about that as long as he can be consistent. Avoid stupid turnovers like underthrowing balls, to Jeremiah Smith like he did, and that was a bad throw. That's fine. I'm fine with that because they're going to put up 50 doing that with Judkins and Henderson, because right now those guys are playing at just an absolutely elite level. I think both of them are averaging above. I just looked this up. I know that Henderson or Judkins is averaging above 9 yards per carry right now, which is ridiculous. But I think Henderson,
like 8, and it's
he's like 8.5 at least. Yeah,
it's like 8.6. So they're both
which is
averaging
insane.
over 8.5 yards a carry. And Henderson has like maybe half as many touches so far as Judkins does too. Which,
right.
I mean, that's for the sake of keeping that guy healthy is great.
Yeah. I'm cool with it.
I mean, it's very funny you open the show with a comment from Will Howard, because really my only takeaway from this game was the interception that he had, because it was the only attempt of the game that Ohio State had that was like of, I think, over 20 yards or something.
Yeah, right. Pretty much.
My great fear for this team is that they all the running stuff is great. The offensive line has killed all of these games so far, but these have all been effectively glorified dress rehearsals for when they actually start to play more legitimate teams, or at least teams that are better equipped to throw up some sort of resistance.
Sure.
To that point, Michigan State, who just, granted, they were I think within touchdown underdogs to Boston College, but just lost, had been previously undefeated before that. But they're already going to be the best team that Ohio State has played by a very substantial margin, I think.
Oh, sure.
When they do that this weekend. So it'll be interesting to see how the offensive line, as they continue to get more difficult assignments, responds to that. It's funny, there's this big controversy right now surrounding mostly the NFL, but general football discussion about the use of defenses with too high safeties.
Yeah.
And my thinking around that relative to Ohio State is just, if you're a good team, you will never, ever have to worry about playing that type of defense against Will Howard. When they play, I am terrified when they play a team with a competent all-around defense that is able to just kind of stack all the personnel within the first 20 yards and not worried about getting beaten over top, not because the talent at receiver isn't there, but just because they don't have to worry about the ball getting to those guys accurately, even if they do get beat. I am worried about what this offense is going to look like when those first 20 yards that, granted, Howard's been exceptional at attacking, but again, when there's a defense that is like, we don't have to respect getting beaten over the top, so we're just going to protect what's directly in front of us. I wonder how much of the success that they've had in these first 3 games is going to translate against more skilled opponents that are able to attack them like that.
I think that's a reasonable thing to worry about or to think about, because, I mean, you're right. The downfield passing game has been pretty lacking, not a huge
been
feature.
Almost non-existent outside of a couple completions against Western Michigan.
Right. So it's not been something that they featured. The other thing, though, that I think is interesting is that they haven't featured a whole lot of Will Howard's running skills yet either. And I know that's kind of like part of the same thing, but if you do, if you include that as part of your offensive package, right, that's something that the team has to prepare for. That is when the safeties have to start creeping up, because then you've got a situation where you don't know where the ball is going to be going, even if it is a running play. And that's when I think you have more opportunities to kind of hit people deep, and not even deep, but just medium routes, 20, 25 yards. You don't have to be throwing it 50, 60 yards down the field. But that's not something that they've shown a whole lot of either. And I think that's intentional, for a couple of reasons. I think they're doing it in part because they don't want to put a lot on film, but I also think they're doing it in part because they don't want this guy to get hurt, because they understand that what's behind him is a guy who is also prone to injury and not terribly accurate. And then a freshman, right? So I think right now they're playing it pretty conservatively. And again, part of that is because I think Will Howard is who he is, and he's a little bit limited when it comes to that kind of play, but also because they're trying to protect the guy a little bit. So I guess what I'm just interested to see is how creative they get when they have to be creative, and when that happens. What game will force Chip Kelly to really kind of reach into his bag of tricks and say, okay, now we have to we got to put it all on the table because we don't have a choice, because we got
the one thing that I'll say to that. And again, this is now Chip Kelly's offense. So it's not what we've seen previously under different quarterbacks at this school isn't necessarily going to translate to what we're going to see from Will Howard. But in terms of the personnel that Ryan Day has had here, it's important to remember that Haskins was not really a legitimate rushing threat
No.
outside of, the game against Maryland that was goofy for all sorts of reasons.
Yeah.
Stroud was very consistently Ohio State fans were begging the guy to run the ball, and we didn't really see him do that until his final few games, and more in his second year than certainly his first year. But the first year that he was in Ohio State's offense, he hardly ever did a forward running attempt, which is funny because the first touchdown he ever scored in an Ohio State uniform was a 49-yard rushing touchdown in garbage time against Michigan State.
Right.
And then McCord, obviously, which we didn't put it on the agenda, but we should talk about that game later because I was dying to talk about that when we got to the national topic, given the wild stuff that happened last week.
Just to, not to get too far off track. Not to get too far off track, but I really did love all of the national articles and things like saying like, "Wow, Ohio State must sure be having some sour grapes." It's like, okay, just give it a couple weeks, guys. We'll see what happens.
Yeah, 2 games into the season. Well, it's because of that comment that the coach made or whatever, where he was like, "Oh, I should."
Of course, right.
Flowers or whatever for
that's exactly
kicking McCord out of Columbus.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
No.
That's right.
No, that was more that was more of people like me than anybody else.
Right.
But, no, I'm just kidding. Anyway, we'll talk more about that later. But McCord, despite the fact that he just had a rushing touchdown in his last game for Syracuse that Marvin Harrison Jr. called the most athletic thing he's ever seen McCord do, McCord never ran the ball for Ohio State. I think he might have had maybe 1 forward carry last year, if that. So the only quarterback that we've really seen run the ball to any effect in a Ryan Day system is Justin Fields. And even then, Fields almost never ran for how talented he was outside of the red
plays.
Zone. His rushing ability really only came into effect when Ohio State would get into the red zone. You almost never saw it on improvised plays or anything else when Ohio State wasn't in that part of the field.
Right.
So just based on, again, Chip Kelly might choose to attack things differently as the season goes on. But my expectation right now is that that's probably what we're going to see from Will Howard as well, is that it's not going to be until they get into that scoring range that they really start to do more design quarterback runs. I know we saw one in the Akron game where they weren't quite in the red zone. I think they were in Akron territory and they did one on like a first down or something. So I remember Judkins had a really good block on that play. But outside of that, we haven't seen a lot of really designed quarterback rushing attempts. And I just think that based on how we saw Fields utilized, despite his talent in that area, and then he goes to the NFL and he sets a bunch of
rushing
Bears
records.
and NFL rushing records as a quarterback. I think that some fans, you might just want to prepare yourself to see that facet of Howard's game underutilized, because there is a history of that in Ohio State's offense, despite how talented their quarterbacks may be there. It's more about keeping the defense honest with that potential than actually, going out of your way to put it on display. So that's kind of my expectation with Howard.
I'm curious to see how that is implemented, because you're right. And even up to this point, I mean, I take that back, because there's been a couple plays where you can see that there's the option, right? Like they have the quarterback option. They just don't take it. They haven't taken it yet. And that that's a setup for later on in the season where it's like, okay, this is where Will Howard keeps it and then runs for 25 yards or something like that. And, a lot of time it's on play action and you're like, okay, well, that's logical. And I think for a defense trying to attack Ohio State, that's not going to be a surprise, right? Like that's something that I think you've seen as an integrated part of the offensive game plan. And I guess what I'm looking for more than that is, not necessarily going back to what Urban Meyer was doing, JT Barrett, but something where like Will Howard is being treated as a runner rather than just a passer who has an option to run. And I don't know if they'll, and to your point, I don't know if they'll actually integrate that in any real form in the season. That just may not be in the plan. That just may not be part of it. You've got 2 all-world running backs. Why would you risk your quarterback doing that? But I am really interested to see how that progresses as the season goes on and as they have to play some really tough defenses. Because I don't know, that feels like an added element to your offense that can change the course of a game if something else isn't working out. So lot of cool stuff to kind of like look forward to and pay attention to as the season goes on. I mean, as far as this game goes, they racked up like 570 yards almost.
They rushed and passed for over 280 yards, or at least
yeah,
280 yards. So that's pretty good.
It's pretty good. It's pretty good. It's Marshall, but it's pretty good. That's a good day's work for pretty much anybody.
It's worth a Tudor's biscuit or doesn't.
That's right. Which, by the way, Tudor's biscuit. Okay, there are several locations in Ohio, including in Xenia. Okay, so if people in Ohio are like, "Oh man, Tudor's biscuit," you can get them in the great state of Ohio.
Yeah, you don't need a West Virginia NIL deal to scoop those up.
That's what I'm saying. And you know what? I have not personally been to a Tudor's biscuit, but now I really want to. Maybe next time I roll down like 71 or whatever, I'll do that. So anyway, I thought it was a pretty good win. I thought it was fun to watch. I do think there's some stuff they need to get cleaned up on defense, but offensively, they've got options, and what they're doing right now is completely working. So I'm not really concerned there, at all. So we're going to get into kind of the national stuff. Before we do that, we also got to do Ask Us Anything. And we want to remind you that the Dubcast is sponsored by the dry goods store at 11warriors.com, drygoods.11warriors.com. Shirts, hats, stickers. Check it out. They're great. It's awesome. Let's do a little Ask Us Anything. And I want to remind you that you can ask us anything that's on your mind by sending us questions to Dubcast at 11warriors.com. We've got several very good questions this week, so let's go ahead and get started with Kevin. Let's start with Kevin here. Oh no, sorry. I got to make sure they're in order. This is from Bob, a Buckeye trapped in Florida. This one's for me, I guess specifically. Johnny, you have the national parks poster behind you each week. Oh, it's right there. For both of you, although George, your background does not lend itself to such an inquisitive type of question. Background meaning like the background behind yourself.
Did he write that, or did you just ad lib that?
No, I didn't. It's right. I'm reading it. I'm reading the email. What is your favorite park that you have visited and why? What park have you not been to that you want to visit and why?
Oh God.
Have you gone to any of the national parks?
I hate this question because when I moved back from California, I worked out of Los Angeles for a summer in 2019.
Okay.
And on my way back to Chicago, because I drove out there and then I was going to drive back, in like September, late September of 2019, I charted a course where I was going to drive. And I did this partially to check off a bunch of states on my 50 list too.
Sure.
I was going to stay with my cousin in San Francisco one night. Then I was going to drive 15 hours to Spokane.
Okay.
And then from Spokane, I was going to go to Glacier National Park in Montana, which is only 4 hours away.
Oh, that's
and then I was going to drive down to Yellowstone and see Yellowstone. Then I was going to go from Yellowstone to Bismarck, South Dakota. And then from Bismarck, South Dakota, I was going to drive up to the border so that I could check off, not the Canadian border, the border of South and North Dakota, so that I could just say that I was in North Dakota and then immediately make a right turn into Minnesota and go to the Porkies, which is a national park that's in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan.
Okay.
And then drive down to Chicago. And I was going to do that over the span of about 4 or 5 days.
Wow.
Part of the reason I wanted to go to Glacier National Park was because I wanted to see the Northern Lights. And so I'm crushing my drive. And then on the day that I'm supposed to, and they're supposed to be like brilliant visibility or whatever, like the lights, I'm checking like the Northern Lights radar or whatever. And it's like, it's supposed to be great or whatever.
Yeah.
That part of the country, the day before I get there, this is late September. Ohio State is about to play Nebraska in that game where Jeff Okuda got the interception, like kind of lying on his back.
Oh yeah, yeah.
You remember that?
Yes, I did.
That was the game that happened when I got to Yellowstone. There's a freak blizzard in late September.
Late September, nice.
Like, I'm saying it was so bad that when I checked into my hotel door was getting literally blown shut by like 50-mile-an-hour gusting wind on top of all the cold. Like,
it's bonkers.
I remember thinking, like, I kind of want to just drive up there to see, like, just to make a point, because I've come this far anyway, and the wind is literally whipping into my face in the direction I want to go, and I'm like, Mother Nature is just determined to not let me do this.
Yeah. Well,
and I just couldn't go. And then the blizzard carried over to Yellowstone, and they had to close Yellowstone, and I got snowed out of Yellowstone.
Dang.
And so I just sat in my hotel room and watched the Ohio State-Nebraska game and couldn't go anywhere. It was devastating. So I got to go to the Porkies in like Ironwood, Michigan, but it was like rainy and cloudy, and I didn't even really get to appreciate, the fact that it was fall and everything. So by default, that's my answer. But yeah, I mean, I would love to go to a lot of these like national parks. It's just Mother Nature's determined to not let me enjoy her miracle. So it sucks, but it is
selfish. That sucks. That really sucks. And
it was so bad.
You know what? And I'm not like a big, I'm not one of the, like, I've got the poster, and there's a lot of these places that I really desperately want to go to, but I haven't really had the opportunity to go to a lot of the national parks. Like, I've been to the Great Smoky Mountains. I've been to Mammoth Cave down in Kentucky. Love that. That was sick. Did a bunch of tours down there, and the area itself is beautiful and whatnot. And I think that's pretty well. I've been up to Cuyahoga, which I know a lot of people like poo-poo because it's, it's the urban national park. It's not even qualified as national, blah, blah, blah. But that's basically it. I would say one of the parks that I've been to that I thought was one of the more impressive, at least on the eastern part of the United States, that isn't an actual national park, but it is a really impressive state park, is Sleeping Bear Dunes in Michigan. The northern part of Michigan, and that's pretty wild. That's a really, really, really cool part of the state. You walk up this like 300-foot tall dune, and then it just looks like you're on Mars, and it's great.
I'm a big fan of the Saugatuck Dunes.
Oh yeah, any of the dunes like on the Great Lakes are just unbelievably impressive. And then you get up to the top and you overlook like the sea, this inland sea, right? This crazy freshwater sea. It's a really cool experience. I enjoyed that a lot.
We dig on those Pure Michigan commercials a lot.
Yeah,
I mean, if there's one redeeming quality that state has,
they've got a ton of natural beauty.
It's a nice place to go for a nature walk.
Yeah. But I would love, I mean, honestly, Glacier National Park is super high up there on my list. I really want to go to Yosemite. I really, really, really want to see the redwoods. Like, that is a huge bucket list item for me. Just to see, I mean, I've had friends and family have gone and seen them, and they're just like standing by these massive living things. It's just unbelievable to me. I would love to do that. I did spend some time in Hawaii. I was there for a couple weeks a while ago, and we tooled around there, and there's just, I mean, every single part of that. I was on Oahu, and every single part of that island is just unbelievable. So that was pretty cool. And then outside of the US, I've been on volcanoes and stuff, and I've seen volcanoes, and like that's a whole other crazy wild experience. But man, yeah, I would kill to go to Glacier or Yosemite or any of the redwoods or sequoias. Like, that would
just don't go during a blizzard.
Yeah.
If you can help it. Don't go during a blizzard in September if you can help it.
Yeah, I'll make a note of that.
Otherwise, go to Hawaii. That's a pretty good option too.
Hawaii's sick, dude. Like, if anybody gets a chance, you got to do it. So this is from Kevin. Do you think that bye weeks are good or bad for college football teams? I don't care. I actually think bye weeks are bad for me, and that's really the only thing that I care about. That's the only thing. Like, I don't care whether they're good or bad for teams.
It's a more interesting question than you're giving it.
It is an interesting question.
Credit for.
I just hate the idea that Ohio State has a freaking bye week 2 weeks into the season. Like, that's just the dumbest thing. And now we have 2 weeks. Well, now we have 2 because, you have to have all these other games.
Also, yeah.
So screw it. Like, oh my God, it's just so frustrating as a fan and not fun. Yeah, I'd rather decrease the amount of games, make them just back to back. If you have to put on a bye, do it in November. That's fine. Make sure people are rested for the Michigan game. But I'm not. I don't know.
I think they're more beneficial for NFL teams than they are for college football teams.
I would agree with that.
Because at the NFL level, I mean, granted, it's not like it's any less harsh at the collegiate level, but the NFL level, you're playing against NFL caliber athletes. Pretty much every time you're making contact, you're basically getting into a simulated car accident.
Right.
Like people talk all the time about how pretty much every player is playing through some kind of ailment by the end of the season. I mean, I think that's why the bye week is so important. I was listening to another podcast earlier today that was because, since we got that question about what your other podcast intake is,
you were shamed into
trying to expand my horizons a bit.
Right.
But they made the interesting point about how, like, there's no way that NFL team, like, with how scheduling works, that you could pull this off. But, like, how many teams do you think, like, could trade for bye weeks if they could? Like a team, because there's some that are going to have them like next week or week 5 of the season, but then there's some that don't have their bye until like week 14. Your team like the Rams, where like everybody and your grandmother is on IR right now. Wouldn't you like to have your IR like now as opposed to later in the season? And like, what if you could trade for that? I'm sure there are some teams that would be interested in that, but without scheduling and ticket sales work, I mean, there's no way you could pull it off. But for college, I think because the skill level is lower, it's more important for teams that like just to stay in a rhythm. Like it's better for them to be playing on a weekly basis than it is for them to get like a week off in the middle of the season.
Keep people engaged.
Even if that's preceding a big game, like where you've presumably got another week to prepare, sometimes it's better to stay fresh than it just in terms of on-field.
Well, just comfort. Mentally into it. I mean, that's a huge part about it. And like, like I don't think that Ohio State would have beaten Florida in 2006, no matter what the conditions were, just because, the offensive line just got annihilated. But I also don't think that not playing a football game for like 40 days in between their last game and the national championship helped them at all, right? Like I think that if anything, that was just a detriment to what they were trying to do.
There's probably going to be at least a couple of higher seeds in the playoff that get upset. It's because the lower seeded teams that they're playing are going to get a very high quality opponent as a tune-up game, and whichever side comes out the victor of that is going to be, I think, more like ready to go than the team that's going to have a little bit longer of a layoff, but gets like another week to prepare or recuperate or whatever. I think that given how, unless you've got a team like Georgia a couple of years ago that is just like head and shoulders above the pack, I think that the gap between talent in teams that are in the top 12 by the end of the season probably isn't super pronounced, which is why there's been this kind of beckoning for this expansion of the playoff to begin with. And so the team that is more battle tested going into the game and is going to be more battle tested a week earlier than the team that gets another week off, is probably going to have a bit more of an upper hand in that respect. So I honestly agree. I think, is it the top 4 teams get buys?
No, I think it's the top 2. I think
just the top 2.
I think so.
Okay, in that case, I would expect at least one of the top 2 to lose.
Yeah,
that is my bold prediction for the December playoff, all the way out here at the end of September, before we know even who the playoff teams are.
That's right.
Or if Ohio State is one of those 2 teams, one of the top 2 seeds in the playoff will lose to the team that gets to, prove themselves the week.
You can say whatever you want because nobody's going to remember it. And that's,
oh, they'll hold me accountable.
I'll hold you accountable. This next one's from Evan, and this question is for you mainly, George. How are you feeling about Justin Fields leading the Steelers to a 3-0 start while Caleb Williams struggles with a 1-2 Bears team?
I am the tears of Bears fans are just nectar for me right now. I got into I had to do so, and here's the thing, because I've been, like I said, I've got dual citizenship. Okay,
Yeah,
I've been a
right.
Bears and a Steelers fan my whole life. I like I have a great deal of familiarity with how the politics of Chicago football has gone. The pattern every time they get a new quarterback, there's a honeymoon phase, and then there's a little bit of turbulence, and some of the fans have no patience and they get upset and they start throwing a fit, and then the other faction in the fan base tries to defend the quarterback, and eventually they don't get to the Super Bowl, and the pessimists gradually just get louder and louder, and everybody wants to blame the quarterback and the coach. The quarterback gets yanked, and then the coach gets fired, and the media fans the flames of that circus, and then the cycle just renews itself. It's what happened. It's what has happened with every single quarterback the entire time that I've been a Bears fan. It was a miracle that Jay Cutler lasted as long as he did. And yet Jay Cutler is still half jokingly thought of as the greatest quarterback that the Bears have ever had.
No, for real though, he's like seriously like top 2 or 3 of like all time for them, right?
Regardless
like
of whether you want to think he's the best or not,
yeah.
He's still top 2 or 3. Absolutely.
Yeah, which is hilarious because like he clearly, I mean, Jay Cutler is Jay Cutler, right? Like he's his own dude, and he's not gonna be like.
And even Jim McMahon, who won the Super Bowl with them, got ran out of that town in like 2 or 3 years or something after that happened. So it's despite the fact that he's even still a revered Bears figure in his own right in many respects. I could see what was happening with Fields last season, where it was like people were like, okay, it's still taking too long. And it's like you can still point to how many other problems this team has and like why it's not really his fault and why you should just be a little bit more patient. But no, everybody sees that Caleb Williams is a Heisman Trophy winner and the Bears are going to have this number 1 overall pick. And I got into so many arguments last year with people that were calling Caleb Williams the guy.
Oh, sure.
You have to, when the guy is there in the draft, you have to go get him. And so it's time to get rid of Justin Fields. And the narrative just got out of control, in spite of the fact that Fields set an absurd amount of not only Bears franchise records for a quarterback, but also NFL records. People were just willing to overlook that and say he can't throw. His mistakes are unfixable. He's been here too long. Even though the first 2 years he was here, the Bears were a tire fire.
Oh yeah,
and
like he had nobody to throw to. He didn't have any protection. I mean,
he had clear chemistry with DJ Moore. And I just think about Moore's comfort with playing with Fields through all the turbulence of last year relative to the body language that we saw from Moore in their second game before they played the Colts this past weekend, where Moore was like throwing his helmet off and like just his body language, he was just shut down and was visibly frustrated with the fact that Williams wasn't hitting him on routes where he was getting open. And yeah, you know what? We're only 3 games into the career of Williams, but I've been referring to him as Golden Calf Caleb already because he has been anointed as the guy, and it drove Fields out. And it was very, very easy for me to say that this all happened too quickly, and the cycle with Bears fans has just renewed itself again.
Right.
Where they just get too frustrated and want to move on to the next thing.
Yeah, it's good for Justin Fields, though, because he's in a great situation right now, I think.
Yeah, the Steelers have always taken care of their Buckeyes, and that's why I was very grateful that he wound up at that
and
team.
Tomlin's going to give him chances to succeed, and
granted, he wasn't going to be the starter if Russell Wilson didn't get hurt. But after the success that they've started out with, I don't know how you go back to Wilson now. Give it, like, if it ain't broke, don't fix it.
Yeah, no, so if they're winning games, they're going to keep winning.
I would hope that they stick with him, but I remember thinking before the season, I was like, I've never wanted to be one of these people. Like I've always wanted to be one of the positive Bears fans, even though I know history tells me that it's eventually just going to go in the wrong direction and the cycle is just going to renew itself. But I'm so glad that I get to finally for the first time in my life be a heel this year. Finally.
Do they
Because
play? They play each other?
I don't know. I don't think that they do,
Oh,
because
that's
the
sad.
Bears are NFC and the Steelers are AFC.
No. Okay.
But I knew I was in a great position with a hedge, because I said, if the Bears succeed, cool. That's, I'm a Bears fan. That's what I should want anyway. But if they don't, especially if Justin Fields has any semblance of success with the Steelers, oh, I am going to be the most I told you so ass about this to anybody with ears. And I have
that's
been
the true pleasure
relishing
of being,
that 3 weeks into the NFL
George.
season.
That's
Of
the true
course
pleasure.
I was right. We are always right on the Dubcast
Right.
about these things.
That's the true pleasure of being a sports fan. Couple more questions. This one's from Jen. She says, first of all, hi guys. First things first, please restock the pint glasses. Thanks in advance. All right, we'll definitely make sure that happens. Do you have any objects that you've held onto from your childhood, toys, books, etc.? And if so, what are they? Go Buckeyes, FUC. That team up north. I have 2 shirts from the mid 90s that I still wear, which is really weird. First of all, that I have them, and second of all, that they fit me. But I have a Sunset Swampers shirt from 1997. That was the name of the summer swim team that I was on for a very long time. And I still wear it. I still wear my Sunset Swampers shirt. And yeah, I still have some books. There was one book that I read as a kid called The Killer Angels. It won the Pulitzer. It's about the Battle of Gettysburg. I probably read it 5,000 times. I still have a super dog-eared copy of that with the cover torn off that I've probably read and reread 100 times. A few things like that. I don't have a ton of stuff like that. I don't get super sentimental about older things, but that would definitely be, those things I hold on to. I also got, Middletown used to have this thing called Midfest. It was this like international festival kind of thing. And I won a shirt for, I think I was like 11 or 12. I won a shirt for picking up a lot of trash. Like I filled up a bunch of garbage bags of trash, and they're like, here, have a shirt. And I wore that shirt yesterday. So yeah, that's a, how old am I? That's at least a 27-year-old shirt. So, so I still wear it.
The Ohio State jersey that I wore on the show when we did the preview, it was the one going into the Akron game about, I guess, a month ago now at this point. But I've had that since like 6th grade.
There you go.
It was funny. I'd wear that like even in college.
Yeah, you're probably like swimming in it when you're a little kid. That was the thing about the shirts that I have, is that they're like XLs when they gave them to me when I was a little kid, and I look like a ghost in them.
No, that's the thing, is that I started going through puberty pretty early, so it's still, it fits me about it. Well, actually, it fit me better back then, because again, I've lost weight now, so it's actually kind of big on me. That's why I was wearing a hoodie underneath it.
I
wore it on the show a few weeks ago. So yeah, it's funny when I would wear it in college, like I'm trying to remember who number 7 was when I was in school during the Urban Meyer era. It's eluding me at this point, but
that's a good question.
People would ask me who it is, and then I'd have to tell them, no, it's Ted Ginn Jr.
Yeah, I was going to say, yeah, it's always going to be
my favorite
Buckeye
ever.
Was it KJ Hill? No.
I think KJ Hill was 18 or 19.
Maybe he was. I think he was in the teens. That's a good question. If somebody knows this, let us know. In 2014, 2015-ish, who was 7? I'll have to look it up.
Because I know it was Haskins shortly after that, but that was like 2017,
yeah, that was
2018.
Yeah, that was after that.
So there was somebody before then, but the name is eluding me right now.
But
now obviously everybody thinks it's Haskins or Stroud. Nobody remembers that Ted Ginn wore that number, which is
Chris Chugginoff.
So,
last question. This is from our good friend Alvin. If not the Varsity Club, what is your ideal venue for the next Dubgate? We do have, we do the Dubgate. We've got it every year. We're having it this year. We'll be promoting that in the coming weeks. And we usually do it like in the vicinity of the Varsity Club, the VC. But I don't know. The first 11 Warriors tailgate that we did was actually out on the West Lots near Jesse Owens. The actual track out there. and that was fine. We got some cool people show up. Mark Titus showed up, and Greg Oden and all that. And that was fun. But it felt like kind of away from the action. So I do like where we're situated now. I love how adjacent it is to the stadium, but I kind of want to I would love to have like some space in the actual shoe parking lot. You know what I mean? Like in and among the people, as opposed to like kind of in our own little, alcove. You know what I mean?
It was kind of difficult to find last year. We were a little bit tucked away.
Tucked away.
It was still one of the most well-attended Dubgates that the sites ever
It was
had.
nuts. We had tons of people. It was fantastic. I loved it.
I think it was the bourbon taps.
Yeah, it was. But yeah, I would want to do it like in the shoes actual parking lot, like just right in the shadow of the shoe. I think that would be fantastic if we were able to pull that off.
Yeah, that'd be pretty cool.
Yeah, I'd like that. So that is Ask Us Anything for this week. Thank you for asking all of those fantastic questions. We'll keep answering them. Let's do a couple of quick hitters here before we get out of here. First of all, national football scene. A couple items that we would be remiss if we did not mention. Tennessee got past Oklahoma. Neither team looked as dominant, especially Tennessee. Tennessee was a team that a lot of people were super hyped on prior to this game, and then they just kind of looked meh, kind of mediocre. Quarterback play wasn't as great as it had been. Interesting, but I kind of like it when Tennessee gets taken down a peg. Illinois took down Nebraska, two surprising Big Ten teams that I don't think people expected a ton out of. And I like that, first of all, Brett Bielema is on a roll. And secondly, that he's apparently in charge of this like group text that all these Big Ten coaches are in, which is like, I don't even want to imagine the kind of things that he's putting into that group chat. Like that sounds like hell. But
posting a bunch of drunk shirtless selfies after.
Yeah, games. I was like, okay. So anyway, he's got them rolling. That's a game that actually looms pretty large for another team we're going to talk about here in a second. James Madison and the University of North Carolina combined for 120 points. And then Mac Brown, because they lost 70-50 to James Madison, Mac Brown offered to like quit immediately after the game. And his players like, no, Mac, we love you so much.
I don't understand that at all.
I don't understand any element of that. I don't understand why you would quit right after that. I don't understand why, if you offered to, your players would be like, no, quit, stay.
But I guess if you guys want me
to, like, nothing about that story makes sense.
Dude, if you want to quit and hide your head in embarrassment,
just quit.
Just say that. Don't make us say that's what we want.
Right. Exactly.
I mean, that's a difficult position to be in if you're a North Carolina fan.
Yeah, it's really weird. And then you let James Madison put up 70 points on you. How was that even like? I don't. UNC was a couple years ago not a good team, not like a team that people are like, oh wow, this is a potential playoff team, but like they were top 25. They were on the fringe of that. They weren't bad. And I don't know how the hell you go from there to giving up 70 James Madison. That's pretty crazy to me. Michigan squeaked past USC at home. I thought they're going to lose that. Lincoln Riley comes out with just like no clue about what to do.
Pissed down his leg. It's crazy how they managed to lose that game.
Yeah, I mean, here's the thing. So their offensive line, USC, I'm talking about, is an absolute sieve, right? Their quarterback, Miller Moss, was just running the entire game. I mean, he had no time to throw or look downfield. But at some point, you've got to figure out like, oh, let's maybe run the ball, which I think they were like averaging 6.5 yards a carry against Michigan. They just kind of said, oh, screw it. They got down 2 touchdowns early because Donovan Edwards decided to do something for once, and Callow Mullings was himself. And they scored 2 long touchdown runs. And I just think Lincoln Riley completely turtled after that. I think he got so shook by those 2 long runs and had like, flashbacks to Alex Grinch defenses that he was like, oh God. And then he's like, let's throw the ball 50 times. And
that was the thing that really bothered me is that, so we were heading for a result that was going to be delicious to talk about on this show.
Yeah.
And was going to be great for you to write about in Threat Level. And then Donovan Edwards fumbles. It looks like he fumbles the game away for them, which is very amusing to me, and I'm sure all the other anti-Michigan viewers at that point, because it's like, all right, Mullings is observably a better football player than Edwards is at this point.
Yeah.
What is it going to take for you to just lean on that guy?
Which
as
is crazy.
To someone that you have anointed this star that's not even really that good.
That's what I don't get. They give so much run. And by run, I mean just like snaps, attention, focal point of their offense to Donovan Edwards and other guys who are just clearly inferior to Callum Mullings. And Callum Mullings is good, but he's not like some mind-bendingly great running back. But he is obviously better.
He's pretty good.
He's pretty good, but he's obviously better than Donovan Edwards. And it's not even like it's night and day. I mean, it's Donovan Edwards had that really good run, had one really good run, and then after that proceeded to do nothing else for the rest of the game.
It's like there's just too much loyalty built into what happened.
It's
during
so
the
weird
to quit on him or something. It's bizarre.
It's bizarre. And
the thing that really bothered me though was the drive before they kicked back to Michigan, and then Mullings had that ridiculous third down conversion that got them into the first and goal.
Where he broke like four tackles. Yeah,
he broke two tackles where the guys had them wrapped up dead to rights and then just couldn't finish the takedown. Riley called on like they got nowhere on first down, and then on second and long and third and long they called two screen passes that both got blown up and did nothing. And it's like, given the way that you took this game back, you are just calling this right now. You're Lincoln Riley. You've been anointed one of the great play callers in college football, and that's what you dip into your bag with when the game is on the line. And it reeked of just, I am way too comfortable with how my defense has played. And the fact that Michigan, I mean, prior to that last drive, it was crazy. I mean,
Michigan had 9 yards in the second half.
9 total yards of offense in the second half. So you can understand, I guess, maybe why Lincoln felt like, okay, this is, we'll be fine. Lean on my defense here. But if they had just been a little bit more aggressive, they presumably could have taken more time off the clock.
They could have taken a ton more time off the clock.
Right. And not put Michigan in a position where it's like, all right, it's do or die. We got to put up or shut up. And then Mullings makes an incredible play and then they go down and they win the game at home. Like it made me madder than it should have. Like I'm frustrated that I allowed a Lincoln Riley loss to make me that upset.
Well, and I think you see this and you really want Michigan to lose, and it's pretty obvious that their offense, outside of Mullings, is almost non-functional. They didn't have Colston Loveland. They didn't have their best offensive player. They didn't have the tight end that is, if he stays healthy, is going to be an All-American. And they're starting a guy that they clearly do not trust to throw the ball more than 5 yards downfield. I mean,
and that Alex would have been a backbreaking loss for them, because for them to lose that game after making a quarterback change like that, I mean, it would have just spoken to how much of the offense is just a cluster right now this early into the Sharon Moore era. But instead, this is the kind of result, especially the way they won, that kind of galvanizes a team.
Right.
And
which sucks because I don't want that.
No. Now I'm nervous about them losing more than 2 games before they play Ohio State. In a way that we were looking at this before, to your point, we're just talking about Bielma. We were looking at the Illinois-Nebraska game after Friday night and saying Michigan's got to go to Champaign in a month.
Well, I think I still think that's a game they have to worry. I still think that's a game they have to worry about, because the truth of the matter is that
I think USC is better than Illinois. And they just won that game.
USC might be better than Illinois, but Brett Bielema and company are not going to be so stupid to pretend that Michigan can throw the football. And that's really what it comes down to.
Are you saying Brett Bielema's a better play caller than Lincoln Riley?
No, I'm saying Brett Bielema is totally cool with playing stupid man ball where you just get into a rock fight, and he's willing to win that kind of game.
Yeah, but that's how Michigan's going to have to play to win now.
Exactly. And that's what I wrote in threat level. I was like, here's the thing: Michigan can be successful with this. They don't have a functioning passing game. They don't. I mean, they passed, I think, for 32 yards against USC. That's going to be the norm, but they can win games that way. And I think people need to understand that. And I said, look, if you remember the Trestle ball years, right? Like, you didn't have to have a fully functioning offense and all, cylinders and things like that. You just had to do one thing, exactly one thing really, really well, and then just be totally fine winning 17 to 14.
You don't even have to go back that far. Do you remember Michigan's game against Penn State last year?
Oh yeah, that's right.
They called like 30 straight running plays to end the game.
That's right.
And that was a Sharon Moore coached game. Harbaugh wasn't there.
Right. Exactly. And it worked. And that's exactly my point. And I still think they have a lot of problems. I mean, their offensive line is still not great. Their wide receivers are trash. Again, they've got a quarterback that they don't trust to throw the ball at all. You could see a game where Alex Orgy throws, 2 or 3 interceptions, and they're like, well, crap, now what do we do? But they also got a guy in Callum Mulling, so I think is legitimately one of the best running backs in the Big Ten. He's going to have a lot of opportunities to kind of like prove that. On the other hand, I'm looking at my watch. It's September 23rd. Okay. So if they want him to run the ball,
is young.
Yeah. If they want him to run the ball 30 to 40 times a game and he's their only offensive solution, that's problems. That's trouble for November. So we'll see what that looks like as the season progresses. But interesting game. Sucks that USC basically showed up without a plan, but that's the way it goes. Welcome
Especially
to the Big Ten,
off
idiots.
A bye, that was kind of surprising.
Yeah, right. Yeah. Welcome to the Big Ten, Lincoln Riley. Try not to do that again. So last thing I want to mention real quick, I would be remiss
for the national stories.
For the national, no, well. This is the most.
We have to talk about McCord.
Okay, Kyle McCord. All right, real quick.
You forget this?
Yeah, it's fine because you
were like, "Oh, nothing interesting happened this week" when we were talking pre-show. And I'm like,
Kyle
all
McCord,
sorts of crazy things that happened.
Sure, Kyle McCord was posited as this potential Heisman candidate,
the savior of upstate New York football.
That's right. And then he goes out and he kind of has a game that
he has a Kyle McCord game.
He has a Kyle McCord game. Is incredibly reminiscent of the kind of things that we saw at Ohio State. And it's not to say that he's like a terrible quarterback or something like that, but like that's he's just inconsistent, and that's what you're going to get from the dude. And when he's under pressure, he's going to only complete half his passes and throw an ill-timed interception. Like that's going to happen.
I mean, we saw so many interesting things, though. Like, again, that rushing touchdown he had where he not only rushed 20 yards and booked it, but also evaded a sack in the pocket to set up that
mobile
rush.
As hell. He looked great.
Like, that kind of, like, ability to shed off pass rush and then break a run for positive yards, that was not present for Ohio State last year. If you got to Kyle McCord in the pocket, he was getting sacked. Like,
he was just immediately falling down. Yeah,
right. Like there was stuff that was in that game that we didn't see at Ohio State that, like, if that was your first time watching McCord this season, you're like, okay, I kind of get why they're like, thank you, Ryan Day, for ushering McCord out and giving him to us. We should send you a gift basket. And then the flip side of that was, there were a lot of things that went wrong for Syracuse in this game that I don't necessarily think were McCord's fault. I don't think the pick six that he threw was really his fault, because clearly there were several receiving players, not just the receivers, but also the tight end in the case of the pick six for Syracuse that were not doing their assignment correctly or just weren't doing what McCord expected, that led to the variety of miscues, that being the most pronounced one. But the second interception he threw was just an observably awful decision.
Oh, it was terrible.
And bad throw.
Yeah. And it was at the worst possible time.
And that is the McCord experience that we will remember as Ohio State fans, because it's the same thing he did in the Michigan game.
Yeah.
You made a boneheaded mistake at the most inopportune time of the game.
Right. And he still
ends up compromising the result.
He still threw for like 340 yards, but you make that one mistake at the worst possible time and it costs your team the game. And that's
I would rather have someone like Will Howard going forward, who, while maybe not as talented with his arm, at least can function better in a game manager role. I can feel better about that guy not making a super compromising mistake than I would if McCord was back for round 2 this year.
Yeah, I mean, we'll see how it plays out in some of the bigger games, but I'm kind of with you. I feel more confident at least with Will Howard back there. Last thing I want to say,
better than Devin Brown.
we didn't really mention that. I did say to Devin Brown, like, why are you giving this guy reps? For love of God, like Julian's saying, on these blowouts, give him the reps. He's the number 2. Let's stop pretending anybody wants Devin Brown out there as the second guy.
Again, I can understand that it's like if Howard gets hurt, Brown is more replicable of the skill set than Sane is. But at the same time, it's clear Sane has the higher ceiling.
It's not even
hope
close
that they kind of go to him, but I can understand in theory why they're still entertaining Brown as the backup.
Last thing I want to say, women's hockey started their national championship defense, and unfortunately they had a rough go of it to begin the season against Minnesota Duluth. But Joy Dunn and company and Coach Muzzarell, I gotta say, like, I think they're legit. I think they're awesome. They will rebound from this difficult start to the season. They still deserve an actual ice rink. So for the love of God, please, Ohio State, get that going.
Johnny is just subconsciously repressing his buyer's remorse for his $40.
No, I'm not. You know what? I said I'd get that shirt if they won the national championship. They won the national championship. I got the shirt. It's a great shirt. And I have no remorse whatsoever.
And I do not regret my purchase.
Here's the other thing. Here's
staring down an 0-2 record.
No.
Duluth.
They'll bounce back, and I'm telling you, I'm dead serious about this. I'm going to make an effort to get out to at least 1 or 2 of their games this season because I do want to support
head coach at Ohio State. He said,
pound for pound, best. Hey, how many national championships besides the synchronized swimming?
I'm just giving you guff.
No, I know. But my point is that that is a program that deserves your support. Please follow them. Pay attention to what's happening with women's hockey and go out to, see some of the games. Force Ohio State to acknowledge that they deserve a better venue than what they currently have. So anyway, keep an eye on that. Keep an eye on Ohio State. Michigan State, Ohio State, I believe, is around 25-point favorites. I can believe that they cover that. I can see that. So I'm excited to see what they turn out.
That's a more realistic spread, I think, than the ones that we've seen so far.
Yeah, I don't know that I'm ready to make a prediction yet, but I think covering is in the cards.
At the same time, just because of what Marshall showed, and given the fact that Michigan State's quarterback is a little bit of a wild card just relative to the talent that he has, even if the decision making isn't always there.
Yeah.
Don't be surprised if Michigan State rips off a couple meme touchdowns in the same way that Marshall did. That makes this closer than maybe you would otherwise expect.
Yeah.
And
again, I can see that.
This is the best team, I think, pretty clearly that Ohio State has played 4 games into the schedule. So I wouldn't necessarily be surprised if they struggle to break 40, and that if we actually see the starters play all the way to the end of the game this time.
I'm not going to see any of it because it's on freaking Peacock. So, I don't know.
I'm working again this weekend, so I'll be there for it, and I'll be covering what's his name, Jonathan? Is it Jonathan Smith? Their new coach Michigan State's the guy that replaced Tucker has some sort of really generic. I know he was at Oregon State before. He did really well there. It's something like Jonathan Smith
Jones. That'll be interesting. Yeah, man, 7 interceptions for Aiden Childs so far this year.
They had an opportunity. Like they were beating Boston College.
No. I know. I mean, he's talented.
Go ahead.
He's all over the place.
They were winning, and then they gave up a go-ahead 42-yard touchdown pass with like a minute and a half left, and then he drove them into the Boston College 35. They had like 37 seconds left, where if they had just been a little bit more patient, they probably could have gotten into the red zone and made a legitimate threat to go win that game. And then he just threw an absolutely ridiculous. I'm trying to find you. I mean, you're a father of a young child, so you can probably understand this parallel or where I'm going with this better or phrase it better than I would, but it's like when a kid has a reasonable amount of success doing something, and so they just start like doing it a lot.
Yes.
and then they get too excited and they do something extremely stupid
Right.
that ruins all their
Right.
enthusiasm for it.
Right.
That's what the Aiden Giles experience is, where he got them all the way to the 35 in like 3 plays and then threw a pick in the end zone that cost them the game.
Yeah. It's like I'm jumping on the couch. Everything's going really great. What if I did a flip?
There you go. See, I knew you'd have the real world experience to phrase what I was trying to get.
No, I totally understand that. So that'll be interesting. I'm excited for that game just because it is a step up in competition. We'll see how Ohio State reacts. And then, of course, right after that, the Dubcast will be there to talk about all of that and everything else going on in college football and the sporting world in general. So until then, I'm Johnny.
I'm George.
And we'll see you next time.
Take care, folks.